The morning sky above New York burned crimson as the Galactic Empire's dreadnoughts descended through Earth's atmosphere like metal gods announcing Judgment Day. Admiral Zextar stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, watching through the viewport as his fleet of 300 warships took positions above the blue-green world below. "Such a primitive species," he remarked to his second-in-command, Commander Vosh. "Look at their cities. No energy shields, no orbital defense platforms. They haven't even achieved faster-than-light travel yet." Vosh consulted his tactical display, where red dots marked every major population center on the planet. "Intelligence reports indicate approximately 8 billion sentient beings, Admiral. Should we proceed with standard pacification protocols?" "Standard protocols?" Zextar's mandibles clicked in amusement. "Commander, this isn't pacification, this is extermination. The hegemony has declared this system perfect for our mining operations, but these humans would only interfere with our work." Below them, the primitive electromagnetic signals that humans called radio waves buzzed with panic. News broadcasts in dozens of languages tried to make sense of the massive ships that had appeared without warning. Military jets scrambled from air bases around the world, their primitive weapons laughably inadequate against ships that had conquered 1,000 worlds. "Begin the cleansing," Zextar ordered. The first city to die was Tokyo. A single pulse from the Dominion's main cannon turned 12 million people into vapor and ash. The energy beam carved through buildings like they were made of paper, leaving only a perfectly circular crater 20 kilometers across where Japan's capital once stood. In the White House Situation Room, President Martinez watched the satellite feeds with growing horror. "How many ships?" she asked the Joint Chiefs. 300 confirmed contacts, Madam President," General Harrison replied, his face pale. "Each one is roughly the size of a naval carrier, but they're using energy weapons we can't even comprehend." "Options? We're launching everything we have, but our missiles can't penetrate their shields. It's like throwing stones at a tank." On the screens, Sydney vanished in another flash of light. Then Mumbai. Each city died in seconds, taking millions with them. "Madam President," the Secretary of Defense interrupted, "we're getting reports that our nuclear submarines are still operational. The electromagnetic interference isn't reaching underwater." "Launch everything," she said without hesitation. "If we're going to die, we'll die fighting." Across the globe, humanity's last desperate gambit began. Nuclear submarines surfaced and launched their ballistic missiles while underground silos opened to send ICBMs streaking toward the alien fleet. For a brief moment, hope flickered as hundreds of nuclear warheads converged on the invaders. The warheads detonated harmlessly against the ship's energy shields, creating brilliant flowers of light that illuminated the alien hulls without leaving so much as a scorch mark. Zextar watched the nuclear display with mild interest. "Impressive for a pre-FTL species," he admitted. "They actually managed to weaponize nuclear fission. Mark this in the historical record. They showed more spirit than most." "Shall we accelerate the cleansing, Admiral?" "Why not? I'm growing bored of this world." The bombardment intensified. London, Paris, Berlin, Rome, European capitals vanished one by one. Moscow's Red Square became a lake of molten glass. Beijing's Forbidden City simply ceased to exist. In North America, Los Angeles disappeared, followed by Chicago, Houston, and Philadelphia. The death toll mounted beyond comprehension. 1 billion, 2 billion, 4 billion. The alien fleet worked methodically, their computers calculating the most efficient firing patterns to maximize casualties while preserving the planet's valuable mineral deposits. In a bunker deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, Dr. Sarah Chen frantically typed at her computer terminal while explosions shook the facility above. "The quantum communicator is still working," she told Colonel Marcus Webb. "I've got a connection to the Titan research station." Titan? Webb's eyes widened. That's Saturn's moon. I thought that was just a mining operation. That's what we told everyone, Chen said grimly. The real Project Erebus was classified above presidential level. Only 12 people knew the truth. Above them, another explosion rocked the bunker. Denver had just been erased from existence, and the alien ships were working their way towards smaller targets. Doctor, whatever you're talking about, now would be a good time to explain. Chen's fingers flew over the keyboard. 20 years ago, we found something in the ice on Titan. Something that wasn't human. The military took it to a black site facility and tried to study it, but it killed everyone who went near it. Everyone except one man. What kind of something? We never found out what it was. Some kind of artifact, maybe a weapon from a war that happened before humans existed. But the man who could touch it, he changed. The transformation was so terrifying that the Joint Chiefs ordered him frozen in cryogenic storage and launched him to Titan. They called the operation American Boogeyman because that's what he became, something that even hardened soldiers couldn't look at without having nightmares. Another city died above them. The bunker's lights flickered. The aliens don't know about Titan, Chen continued. Our deep space monitoring station there is still operational. I can send a message to wake him up. Wake up what exactly? Chen turned to face him, and Webb saw fear and desperation warring in her eyes. I don't know, Colonel. But right now, he's the only hope humanity has left. The quantum transmitter hummed to life, sending its coded message across the void to Saturn's largest moon. In the depths of space, an automated system received the signal and began its programmed response. On Titan, emergency lights flickered to life in a research facility that had been dormant for 2 decades. Deep beneath the ice and methane, where human scientists once studied things beyond their understanding, a cryogenic chamber began its thawing cycle. The readouts showed impossible vital signs, body temperature fluctuating between human normal and something that should have been instantly fatal. Brain activity that made no sense to the monitoring equipment, cellular regeneration rates that defied every law of biology. The man inside the chamber opened his eyes, and for a moment, they weren't entirely human. 20 years of frozen sleep ended as the chamber hissed open. He sat up slowly, his movements careful and controlled. The monitoring equipment around him sparked and failed, unable to process the readings it was detecting. He stood, 6 feet tall but somehow seeming larger, and walked to the communication station where Earth's final message waited. His finger touched the screen, and the text appeared in languages he hadn't known when they first froze him: English, Mandarin, Arabic, Spanish, all of them carrying the same desperate plea. 8 billion dead, humanity extinct, Earth under alien control. Help us. He smiled, and the expression held no warmth at all. In the reflection of the darkened computer screen, his face seemed to shift and change, showing glimpses of something that hadn't been there before the artifact changed him. Time to go to work, he said to the empty facility. His voice carried through the chamber in ways that sound shouldn't be able to travel, as if reality itself was bending around him. The alien artifact that had transformed him 20 years ago pulsed with dark energy in response to his words. On Earth, Admiral Zextar continued his systematic extermination of the human species. His fleet had reduced the planet's population to less than 1 billion survivors, most of them hiding in underground bunkers or remote wilderness areas. Excellent progress, he reported to the Hegemony High Command. The primitive species put up more resistance than expected, but we should complete the cleansing within another standard cycle. The planet will be ready for mining operations shortly after. He had no way of knowing that in the depths of space, something was stirring that would make his worst nightmares seem like pleasant dreams. The American Boogeyman was awake, and for the first time in 20 years, he had a purpose. The artifact had chosen him for a reason. Now the galaxy would learn why some doors should never be opened and some powers should never be unleashed. The real war was about to begin. The research station on Titan had been designed to survive almost anything: meteor impacts, equipment failures, even nuclear war. It had not been designed to withstand what happened when the American Boogeyman began preparing for his journey to Earth. The walls around him rippled like water as reality bent to accommodate something that shouldn't exist in the normal universe. Ancient systems throughout the facility came online without anyone activating them, their screens displaying symbols that predated human civilization by millions of years. He walked through the corridors with deliberate steps, each footfall causing the metal floors to ring with harmonics that human ears weren't designed to hear. In the depths of the facility, he found what he was looking for: the prototype stealth ship that had been prepared for this exact scenario. The Shadow of Liberty was barely 30 meters long. Designed by engineers who had studied alien technology recovered from crash sites over the past century. Unlike the lumbering vessels that humanity had used in their doomed defense of Earth, this ship incorporated principles of physics that most scientists still considered theoretical. More importantly, it had been modified to work with him. The control systems responded to his thoughts rather than his touch. The hull could bend light around itself, making the ship invisible to every form of detection the galaxy had ever developed. And in the cargo bay, secured behind locks that would open only for him, was the alien artifact that had changed him from a soldier into something else entirely. As he settled into the pilot's seat, the ship came alive around him. Not just the engines and computers, the entire vessel seemed to develop a consciousness of its own, one that whispered to him in languages older than Earth. "Ready when you are," he said to the darkness between the stars. The journey to Earth took 6 hours instead of the weeks it should have required. The ship moved through space in ways that violated every law of physics, slipping between dimensions that existed in the gaps of reality. When it finally dropped back into normal space, it materialized less than 1,000 kilometers from the alien fleet. Every sensor on every ship should have detected its arrival. None of them did. Admiral Zextar was reviewing casualty reports when his communications officer interrupted him. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission on an open frequency. Origin unknown." "From the surface? The humans are still trying to negotiate?" Zextar laughed. "Put it through." The voice that came through the speakers was calm, almost conversational. It spoke in perfect hegemony standard, despite the fact that no human had ever heard the language before. "Admiral Zextar of the 3rd Conquest Fleet. Your species has made a grave error in judgment. You have 8 standard hours to withdraw from this system and return the souls of those you have murdered." The bridge fell silent. Vosh checked his instruments frantically. "Sir, I can't locate the source of this transmission. It's coming from everywhere." "Return souls?" Zextar's mandibles clicked in amusement. "What manner of primitive superstition is this? Open a response channel." "Channel open, Admiral." "Unknown speaker, this is Admiral Zextar of the Galactic Hegemony. Your species has been marked for extinction. There will be no negotiation, no mercy, and certainly no resurrection of your dead. Surrender any remaining military assets, and your deaths will be swift." The response came immediately, and this time every member of the bridge crew felt something cold crawl up their spines, as the voice carried undertones that made their primitive brain stems scream warnings. "You misunderstand, Admiral. I am not here to negotiate. I am here to collect. 8 billion souls cry out for justice, and I am their instrument. You have 7 hours and 59 minutes. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in uncomfortable silence. "Analysis," Zextar ordered. "Sir," the communications officer said hesitantly. "According to our instruments, that transmission didn't come from any technological source. It just appeared in our systems. Impossible. Run full sensor sweeps of the system. Find me that ship. For the next hour, 300 of the most advanced warships in the galaxy swept the space around Earth with every detection system they possessed. They found nothing. What they didn't see was the Shadow of Liberty, moving through their formation like a ghost, its occupant studying each vessel with eyes that now saw in spectrums beyond the visible. He counted weapons, analyzed shield patterns, and most importantly, identified the command ship where the one called Zextar waited. The first ship to die was a frigate on the outer edge of the formation. The crew of the Stellar Blade was conducting routine patrols when their reality simply ended. One moment they were scanning for the source of the mysterious transmission. The next, their ship was drifting dead in space, its hull intact, but every living thing aboard reduced to empty shells. "Admiral!" Vash's voice cracked with barely controlled panic. "The Stellar Blade has gone dark. No explosion, no energy signatures, just nothing. Send a rescue team." "Sir, we're getting reports from the boarding party. The crew they're all dead, sir. But there are no wounds. No signs of weapons discharge. They're just empty." Zextar felt the first flutter of unease in his chest. In 30 years of conquest, he had never encountered anything like this. The second ship died an hour later, then the third. Each time, the vessels remained intact while their crews simply ceased to exist. No energy weapons, no explosions, no trace of whatever was killing his people. "Admiral," the tactical officer reported, "we've lost 12 ships in the past 3 hours. Whatever is doing this, it's getting faster." "Impossible. No single ship could take on our entire fleet. Intensify sensor sweeps. Use quantum resonance detectors, gravitational wave monitors, everything we have." "Sir, we're already running every system at maximum sensitivity. If there's a ship out there, it's using technology beyond our understanding." The truth was worse than they imagined. The American Boogeyman wasn't using technology at all. The alien artifact had changed him on a fundamental level, giving him access to abilities that predated the current universe. He moved through space not by bending physics, but by stepping outside of physics entirely. Each ship he visited became a charnel house. He would materialize inside the hull, walking through solid matter as if it were mist. The crews would turn to see a figure in a black uniform that seemed to absorb light, his face hidden behind a mask that showed reflections of things that had never existed. What killed them wasn't weapons or violence. It was the simple fact that mortal minds weren't designed to process his presence. Most died instantly, their consciousness simply shutting down rather than trying to comprehend what they were seeing. A few lasted long enough to scream before their sanity shattered like glass. By the 6th hour, Admiral Zextar had lost 50 ships and was beginning to understand that he faced something outside the normal order of the galaxy. His crew jumped at shadows, and several officers had requested transfers off the bridge. "Admiral, incoming transmission," the communications officer said, his voice barely a whisper. "From where?" The transmission is coming from inside our own ship, sir." This time, when the voice spoke, it seemed to come from the walls themselves. "Time grows short, Admiral. 50 ships, 50 crews. Their souls join the choir of the murdered, and still you do not comprehend your situation." Zextar forced himself to remain calm. "What do you want?" "Justice, restoration, the return of 8 billion lives." "That's impossible. The dead cannot be restored." "You would be surprised what becomes possible when you step outside the boundaries of what your species calls reality. But very well. Since you refuse to undo your crime, you will serve as an example to others." The temperature on the bridge dropped 10 degrees in seconds. Ice began forming on the control panels, and the lights flickered as if struggling against some overwhelming darkness. "I offer you one final choice, Admiral. Order your fleet to withdraw, and I will allow some of you to live. Refuse, And I will show this galaxy what happens when humans are pushed too far. Zextar looked around his bridge at the terrified faces of his crew. Everything about this situation violated his understanding of how the universe worked. No single being could challenge an entire conquest fleet. It was impossible, but 50 ships were already drifting dead in space. "You're bluffing," he said finally. "One ship against 300. Even if you have some kind of superior stealth technology, you can't possibly—" The lights went out. When the emergency power came online 3 seconds later, something was standing in the center of the bridge. The crew screamed and scrambled away from the figure in black, their primitive instincts recognizing a predator beyond their ability to fight or flee. The American Boogeyman stood motionless among the control stations, and for the first time in decades, Admiral Zextar felt what his prey had experienced in their final moments, the absolute certainty that death was inevitable. "Fascinating," the figure said, his voice now coming from directly in front of them instead of through the speakers. "Your species has conquered thousands of worlds, enslaved entire civilizations, committed genocide as casually as others might order breakfast. Yet you still believed yourselves to be the apex predators of this galaxy." Zextar tried to speak but found his voice had abandoned him. "Allow me to correct that misunderstanding." The figure raised one hand, and Admiral Zextar felt his consciousness being torn away from his body, pulled into a darkness where 8 billion human voices waited to greet him with the welcome he deserved. The last thing he saw before the darkness claimed him was his own reflection in the figure's mask, a reflection that showed him not as the conquering admiral he believed himself to be, but as something small and fragile and already dead. On the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, the crew watched their admiral collapse. When they checked his vital signs, they found nothing wrong, no injury, no disease, no explanation for why he was now nothing more than an empty shell. The figure was gone, but his voice remained, echoing from every speaker on every ship in the fleet. "The Admiral has joined his victims in judgment. The rest of you have 2 hours to withdraw from this system. Use that time wisely." For the first time in the history of the galactic hegemony, a conquest fleet prepared to retreat. But some lessons they would learn came too late to matter. Commander Vosh stared at the empty shell that had once been Admiral Zextar, his mind refusing to process what he had witnessed. Around him, the bridge crew of the Eternal Dominion worked in terrified silence, their movements sharp and nervous as they waited for death to return. "Sir," the communications officer whispered, "we're receiving requests for orders from the fleet. What should I tell them?" Vosh forced himself to think past his fear. Protocol demanded that he assume command, but every instinct screamed at him to order immediate retreat. 50 ships destroyed without firing a single shot. The Admiral's mind ripped from his body by something that walked through solid matter like smoke. "Signal the fleet," he said finally. "All ships prepare for immediate withdrawal from the system." "Sir?" The tactical officer looked up in surprise. "We still have 250 operational vessels. Surely we can—" "Can what?" Vosh snapped. "Fight something that kills entire crews without leaving a mark? Something that can appear anywhere, anytime, without our sensors detecting it?" He gestured at Zextar's motionless form. "Look at him. There's not a scratch on his body, but whatever he was is gone forever." The bridge fell silent. Through the viewport, Earth hung in space like a blue-green jewel, seemingly peaceful despite the billions of corpses cooling in its ruined cities. "Begin withdrawal procedures," Vosh ordered. "All ships are to—" The lights died again. This time, when the emergency power flickered on, the American Boogeyman wasn't alone. Behind him stood translucent figures, hundreds of them, then thousands, filling the bridge with the ghostly forms of the dead. Human faces, alien faces, the spirits of every being whose life had been taken by the galactic hegemony across centuries of conquest. "You misunderstand the situation, Commander," the figure in black said calmly. "The time for withdrawal has passed. Your admiral chose poorly, and now your fleet will serve a different purpose." Vosh backed away from the apparitions, his species equivalent of adrenaline flooding his system. "What? What do you want?" "The same thing I have always wanted, justice. But since your kind seems incapable of understanding that concept, I will teach it through demonstration." The ghostly figures began to move, walking through the solid deck plates and control panels as they surrounded the crew. Each one bore the marks of how they had died. Some showed blast wounds from energy weapons, others the empty stare of starvation, still others the burns of atmospheric incineration. "These are the souls your empire has collected over the centuries," the Boogeyman explained. "Every world you've sterilized, every species you've exterminated, every innocent life you've taken for the sake of expansion. They have been waiting for this moment." "Impossible," Vosh stammered. "The dead don't return. Energy dissipates, consciousness ends. Your science is limited by what you can observe and measure. But there are forces in this universe that exist beyond your instruments, beyond your comprehension. The artifact that changed me opened doorways to places where the murdered wait for justice." One of the spirits approached Vosh. A human child, perhaps 10 years old, her face peaceful despite the terrible burns covering her small body. She reached out with one translucent hand and touched his arm. Ice cold shot through his body, carrying with it the sensation of falling through endless darkness while 8 billion voices whispered his crimes. Not just the humans his fleet had killed, but every being who had died because of orders he had carried out, decisions he had made, worlds he had helped destroy. "Do you see now?" the Boogeyman asked as Vosh collapsed to his knees. "Do you understand the weight of what your empire has done?" Across the fleet, the same scene was playing out on every ship. The dead materialized on bridges and in engineering sections, in crew quarters and weapons bays, carrying with them the accumulated guilt of genocide and the promise of judgment. Some alien crews went mad immediately. Others tried to fight, firing their weapons uselessly through the ghostly forms. A few, the wisest among them, simply surrendered to the inevitable and waited for whatever came next. But the American Boogeyman wasn't finished. The artifact that had transformed him pulsed with dark energy, and reality began to bend around the galactic fleet in ways that defied every law of physics. "Your species believes in power," he said to Vosh, who was still writhing on the deck as the weight of his crimes crushed his consciousness. "You measure your worth in the number of worlds you can conquer, the civilizations you can enslave. Allow me to show you true power." Space around the fleet began to fold in on itself. The stars wheeled overhead in impossible patterns as dimensions intersected and merged. The hegemony ships, designed to withstand the rigors of interstellar travel and planetary bombardment, groaned under forces they had never been built to resist. The first ship to fold was a destroyer on the fleet's edge. One moment it was a sleek predator of space, built for hunting down fleeing refugees and civilian vessels. The next it was something else entirely. Its hull twisted into geometric shapes that hurt to look at. Its crew preserved inside, but experiencing time and space in ways no living mind should have to endure. "Each ship in your fleet will become a monument," the Boogeyman explained as reality continued to twist around them. "A reminder to future generations of what happens when mortals mistake cruelty for strength." The transformations accelerated. Cruisers became impossible sculptures that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Battleships folded into themselves until they occupied the same space as their own shadows. Frigates stretched across light years while somehow remaining visible to the naked eye. And through it all, the crews remained alive and aware, trapped in vessels that had become prisons of distorted space-time. They would exist forever as living warnings, experiencing every moment of their victims' pain and fear without the mercy of death or madness to provide escape. "Stop," Vosh whispered from the deck. "Please, we surrender. We'll leave this system, return to hegemony space, never come back." Surrender? The boogeyman knelt beside him, and for the first time, Vosh could see past the mask to the face beneath. It was human, but changed by contact with forces older than the galaxy. "Commander, you killed 8 billion innocent beings. Did they have the opportunity to surrender? Did you show mercy when they begged for their lives?" The ghostly figures began to fade, their purpose served. But as they disappeared, each one left behind a whisper that echoed through the twisted space around the fleet. "Remember us." "The transformation is not random," the boogeyman continued as more ships folded into impossible configurations. "Each vessel becomes a reflection of its crimes. The destroyer that specialized in hunting civilian evacuation ships now hunts itself through endless corridors of its own making. The cruiser that bombarded planetary populations from orbit now experiences bombardment from every angle simultaneously." Vosh tried to stand, failed, and settled for crawling toward the viewport. Outside, he could see his fleet being transformed into something that belonged in the nightmares of gods. Ships became Klein bottles, Mobius strips, tesseracts that existed partially outside normal space. The crew's screams echoed across radio frequencies, carrying their terror and confusion to anyone listening. "Your flagship requires special attention," the boogeyman said, rising to his feet. "It was here that the order for genocide was given. It was here that 8 billion souls were sentenced to death for the crime of existing in a space your empire wanted." The eternal dominion began to change. The hull plates flowed like liquid metal, reshaping themselves into forms that suggested both starship and cathedral, weapon and monument. The interior spaces expanded impossibly, creating chambers that should have required more volume than the entire ship possessed. "Your bridge will become a courtroom," the figure explained as reality continued to twist around them. "You and your senior staff will serve as eternal witnesses to the judgment of every being your empire has wronged. You will experience their final moments, feel their terror, understand their pain, and you will do so forever." The transformation accelerated. Control panels became witness stands. The captain's chair morphed into a judge's bench where the ghostly figure of Admiral Zextar now sat, his empty eyes staring at nothing while his mouth moved soundlessly in an eternal attempt to justify the unjustifiable. "But we were following orders," Vosh gasped as the changes reached him. "The hegemony command. They told us this was legal, under galactic law. And now, they will discover what happens when galactic law conflicts with universal justice." The final transformation began. Vosh felt his body being incorporated into the structure of the bridge, becoming part of the monument while retaining full consciousness and sensation. He would stand forever as a witness to every crime the hegemony had committed, experiencing each atrocity from the victim's perspective while remaining unable to close his eyes or look away. The American boogeyman stood alone on the transformed bridge, surrounded by the living sculptures that had once been the fleet's command crew. Through the viewport, he could see the complete transformation of the galactic fleet, 250 vessels that now existed as warnings written in the fabric of space itself. "It is done," he said to the emptiness between stars. "Let any who find these monuments understand the price of genocide. Let them know that humanity remembers its dead and that some crimes echo through dimensions beyond the physical universe." He turned toward Earth, where less than 1 billion humans still lived in the ruins of their civilization. The planet would recover, given time. Humans were remarkably resilient, and the survivors would build something better from the ashes of the old world. The alien artifact that had changed him pulsed one final time, and the shadow of liberty materialized around him. But he no longer needed the ship to travel through space. The transformation was complete, and he had become something that existed in the spaces between realities. Sleep well, Earth. he whispered as his form began to fade. "Your dead are avenged, and your future is secure. No empire will dare threaten humanity again, for they have seen what waits in the darkness for those who mistake mercy for weakness." The ship and its occupant dissolved into shadow and starlight, leaving behind only the twisted monuments that had once been a conquest fleet. In the depths of space, 250 impossible structures drifted in eternal orbit around Earth, their transformed crews serving as eternal guardians against any who might threaten the recovering world. And in the deepest black between the stars, something that had once been human and was now far more watched and waited, ready to answer the call whenever genocide threatened the innocent. The American Boogeyman had become legend, and legends, as the galaxy was about to learn, were far more dangerous than any mere mortal could ever be. The age of unchecked conquest was over. The age of justice had begun.